Hello and welcome. Our top story is from Nigeria. The military has killed over 50 terrorists that were using drones to attack multiple army bases in the country's volatile northeast. Videos on social media show soldiers standing over a row of several bodies, said to be of the terrorists and their weapons at one of the targeted military bases. The weapons included Kalashnikovs, machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades. The attack was carried out in the early hours of Thursday. The military said that the combined ground and air efforts resulted in the neutralization of over 50 terrorists and 70 others were being tracked down. The military said that several soldiers were also wounded in the fighting. Reportedly, the terrorists belong to the Islamic State West Africa Province, ISWAP, and they launched coordinated attacks on army bases in the towns of Dikwa, Mafa, Gajibo, and Borno State, as well as in Katarko in neighboring Yobe State. Now, after the terrorists were killed, the military said that some vehicles and buildings were also gutted by fire from drone attacks by terrorists and firing during the battle, especially in Mafa and Dikwa, where a part of the defenses was momentarily breached. Reportedly, the terrorists who attacked the bases in Gajibo and Dikwa had entered from neighboring Cameroon. This shows how northeast Nigeria's conflict has spilled over into neighboring countries. Earlier this month, at least 14 soldiers were killed in 2 attacks in Borno, which were blamed on terrorists. Nigeria is Africa's most populous country. It has been fighting the Boko Haram terrorist group and its splinter, ISWAP, for over 15 years. These terrorists seek to establish a caliphate in the country's northeast, where the conflict has killed more than 35,000 and has displaced around 2 million people so far. Since 2019, soldiers have shut down some smaller army bases and moved into larger fortified garrisons known as super camps in an attempt to better resist terrorist attacks. Critics say the strategy has allowed terrorists more freedom to move around rural areas and left travelers more vulnerable to kidnapping. The use of drone technology by terrorists has further worsened the security situation. In West Africa, terrorists are increasingly using drones, often commercial models, modified to drop bombs or grenades. International efforts are underway to counter terrorism in sub-Saharan Africa. For instance, the US approved a potential $346 million weapons sale to improve security in Nigeria. But despite these attempts, there has been a worrying uptick in terrorist attacks this year. Now, for more on this, we have with us Professor Freedom Onuoha, the Professor of Political Science, University of Nigeria, who is joining us from Nsukka in Nigeria. Thank you for being with us, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
Now, what does the use of drones reveal about the evolving capabilities of these terrorist groups in Nigeria's northeast? And how does this shift impact the army's counter-terrorism strategy?
I think it is important for us to recognize that there is a fundamental technological adaptation and tactical evolution in the way and manner in which terrorist groups, particularly the Islamic State in West African province, have evolved over the years and have tried to utilize it in terms of its attack. Way back in 2018, we saw the early stages of the application of drone by these terror groups, but it was largely limited to using them for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. But in the last 2 years, particularly early this year, we have now seen a fundamental tactical shift, from using these drones from ISR, that is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, to now deploying them into attacks. And for me, if you look at the context of the experience we had with the recent attack in Mafa, Dikwa, and Gajibo, and of course, and Katako. This was an attack that took place very late in the night and early Thursday morning. For me, I think it clearly indicates two things.
Yeah.
First is that we can now see that there is a growing capability in terms of the ability of this terrorist group to blend the use of drone in terms of ISR and actual deployment for attack. But for the fact that this took place late in the night, I think it also signals a worrying trend. I have every reasons to conclude that it is very likely also that in terms of their technological and capability, that they've also begun to assess and utilize drones that have night vision capability, which means that before they were using drones that you can only use in the day because it doesn't have night vision capability. But for them to deploy drones in attacks that are midnight and very early in the morning, it does suggest reasonably so that this group are increasingly embracing and utilizing drones that have night vision capability. And it poses a whole lot of challenge for the Nigerian military, particularly the Nigerian army, on the need for them to begin to prioritize and invest on electronic warfare, counter-drone capabilities, and then improving their battlefield intelligence gathering to be able to now blunt the potential sharp edges that these terrorist groups are using to deploy these new technologies.
Yes. And given that Nigeria's military has been battling Boko Haram and its splinter, the Islamic State West Africa province, for over 15 years, what does this latest coordinated assault and evolved capabilities suggest about the current state of the insurgency?
I think if there's any one word to use to qualify the latest stage, it does suggest the fact of resilience. Over the years, since 2014, this terrorist group have lost almost all the major territories they've been controlling. And so, but what they have lost in terms of territorial control, they've been able to compensate it in terms of technological adaptation and upscaling of this technology. So the fact that they're able to sustain this kind of coordinated, sophisticated attacks on military formations, particularly bases that you consider to be within super camps, does suggest, therefore, that we cannot underestimate the resilience and the capability of these Boko Haram members or the terrorist group to leverage on governance gaps, to leverage on their familiarity of terrain to be able to sustain such a devastating attack. But I think it does also raise the need for us to begin to scale up closer regional collaboration against the backdrop that most of these guys came from Cameroon. So it does suggest, therefore, that if they've lost territory in Nigeria, they also still have safe havens in neighboring countries where they can plan and then launch their attacks.
And how significant is the army's claim of killing over 50 terrorists in terms of weakening ISWAP's operational command structure? And what further challenges does Nigeria now face in securing the states of Borno and Yobe amid these drone-enabled attacks?
Well, if it is verified that the military were able to record such a battle stage success that resulted in the killing of over 50 terrorist groups, I think in every sense, both tactically and symbolically, it's a major gain on the part of the military, because then it's going to boost the morale of the soldiers, suggesting that they have the capability to not only withstand these terror groups when they launch attacks, but also to overrun them and force them to record such a very high level of casualty. Again, it's also going to impact on the morale of the terror fighters, if they have lost such number of fighters in such an encounter. However, I must sound a note of caution. I do not think, as a student and a scholar of terrorism, that such massive loss translates to major decapitation or disruption of the tactical command structure of the Boko Haram or the Islamic State West African province, because this group has largely maintained a loose structure that have enabled some of its smaller cells to launch attacks. But I think that that's a major tactical gain, that's a symbolic gain. But the challenge now is for the Nigerian military to recalibrate and to overhaul its counter-terrorism strategy. I keep on emphasizing it. There is a major gap in Nigeria's counter-terrorism strategy, which is the deficit of not having a very lightly armed force, what we call the mobile police force, a force that is slightly under the threshold of regular military force, that should be able to now hold some of the liberated territories by the military, to enable the military have enough resources, have enough fighting men to launch attacks. Otherwise, we will now see that Nigerian counterterrorism will continue to remain in the defensive posture, which means they stand on their basis, guiding these communities why these terrorists can plan and launch attack. Once we have a force that can hold some of those liberated territories, it frees off a lot of military forces and resources to be able to now take the fight against this Boko Haram and finish them once and for all.
Absolutely. Professor, thank you for being with us on First Post Africa.
Thank you so very much.
Want the facts?
The latest developments?
News that gets straight to the point.
Well, we've got all three just for you. This is First Post Live, a brand new show, your window into what really matters.
Don't miss it.